Today we're looking at the Boston Tea Party. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. So in the wake of the Boston Massacre, the British lightened up on the American colonies in terms of regulations and taxes. Many of the 2,000 British troops that occupied Boston were called back to England, and many taxes that had been imposed were repealed. All except for a tax on tea. Tea was extremely popular in the colonies, and the British wanted to maintain the tax as a symbol of their authority to tax the colonies. In response, many colonists began to boycott tea that was shipped to America by the British East India Company, and instead smuggled the tea in and did not pay any taxes. This also made the smuggled variety of the tea cheaper than the British supplied tea. In the past, the British had tried to cut down on smuggling by passing tougher regulations, and those plans had not really worked out so well. And so now they decided to try a new ploy. In May of 1773, British Parliament passed the Tea Act. The Tea Act was not a tax. What it did was it gave the British East India Company the authority to basically sell tea directly to colonists and cut out colonial tea merchants, who were the middlemen and would mark up the tea in order to make a profit. By doing this, they made the price of British supplied tea cheaper than the smuggled tea. So even with the taxes, it was still cheaper than the smuggled tea. So you would think that this was a great deal for the colonists, and they would get cheaper tea and they wouldn't buy the smuggled tea. Well, the colonists saw what the British were doing, and they still refused to buy British tea because of the tax on it. By late 1773, the crisis over tea came to a head in Boston. Near the end of November 1773, 3 British ships arrived at Griffin's Wharf in Boston loaded with British tea. The dock workers there at Griffin's Wharf, many of them of course being members of the Sons of Liberty, refused to unload the tea off the boats and demanded that the ships leave and go back to England. Thomas Hutchinson, who was the colonial governor of Massachusetts, demanded the ships be unloaded and the taxes on the tea be paid. On the evening of December 16, 1773, a crowd of thousands of colonists gathered at the South Meeting House in Boston. The crowd took a vote and voted to not pay the taxes on the tea and not allow the tea to be unloaded. The captain of one of the ships stood up and told the crowd that he had been given orders by the governor to not leave until the tea was unloaded. At that point, Samuel Adams got up and said, "This meeting can do no more to save the country." Now, this might seem like a simple statement from Adams, but in the years following the events of that evening, it was found that this was the signal for the Sons of Liberty to spring into action and unload the tea, just not exactly in the manner that Governor Hutchinson or the British were expecting. So a large group of men wearing Native American disguises began to march towards Griffin's Wharf. Thousands followed them through the streets of Boston. At the wharf, these men boarded the ships and began throwing and dumping chests of tea into the water. For over 2 hours, thousands of colonists cheered as 342 chests holding 45 tons of tea was dumped into Griffin's Wharf. The value of the tea today would be somewhere near $1 million. The men then cleaned up the decks of the ship, leaving almost no sign of the destruction, except for all the water in the harbor, of course, now being turned completely brown from the tea. The men then quickly vanished into the crowd of spectators. At the time, many suspected the Sons of Liberty, and they would have been right, but at the time, no one would admit to who did it. Only one person, Francis Akeley, was arrested and charged with the destruction of the tea. Some colonists rejoice in what became known as the Boston Tea Party, while others realized they might have just pushed the British too far, and they would be right, as the British now would crack down severely on the colonies, and especially Boston. These new policies and regulations by the British in reaction to the Boston Tea Party would be a direct cause of the first shots being fired in the American Revolution. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.